PNG. And this month the speaker is here at ANU. And so I'm chairing it. My name is Stephen Howes. I'm the director of the Development Policy Centre. It's great to have such a good turnout. I don't know if you can, probably can't see here online, but we've got a good room full of people here in Canberra. And then I can see we've got a very big group at the University of PNG in the main seminar room. And then we've got 42 people who are watching online. So that's great. And I guess not surprising because we've got such an eminent speaker. And I'm sure everyone's really keen to hear what Governor Allan has to say. So I don't think the Governor needs much introduction, but he is obviously a Member of Parliament in PNG and representing the East Sepik province, where he's the Governor. And he also has a, he's very well respected as a commentator, and also has been a successful businessman. And also understand that you studied at UPNG, the MBA, so you actually have a connection with the School of Business and Public Policy, which is our partner in the partnership between ANU and UPNG. So Allan will be talking on the subject of making decentralisation work in PNG, lessons learned and future directions. It's a subject a lot of us are interested in, and be very interested to get the perspective of a Member of Parliament. Before I begin, we should also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting. And here in Canberra, that's the Ngunnawal people. So pay our respects to their elders, past and present. Apart from that, I'll just say, we have an hour for the seminar, set aside for the seminar, and I'm sure there'll be lots of interest in asking questions. So obviously, if you're physically in this room, you can put up your hand. I hope there's someone at UPNG to take questions if you're physically in that room. Otherwise, if you're online, what I suggest is put in a question in the chat function, and we'll keep an eye on those questions, and we'll come to you an opportunity to ask. So I think that's it. That's it for me. We're really happy that you've come along. It reminds me of some of our Pacific updates that we held in the middle of winter. It is getting a little bit cold now in Canberra, so thanks for enduring not so good weather. And please give Governor Allan a warm welcome. And
Thank you, Professor. Where do you want me?
I think you can speak there. We can move the camera.
Oh,
and, yeah, that should be fine.
I tend to move around a bit, so
yeah, well, I'll move with you.
Okay. Let me also acknowledge the traditional honors of this land, and I want to thank you and those of you who made this visit possible. How do I start? I think when you look at how business is arranged, by business I mean not just business for profit, but business in general. Business succeeds because the units succeed. In every business, you have the organization, then you have the business units who then hopefully through various means of empowerment, governance, all of these sorts of things, produce an outcome that becomes good for the organization. So that's how I see decentralization, even though it might be a more sort of a public policy sort of arena, it actually comes back to good business practice. And whether that business practice is in a private sector organization, in a government entity, or even in a trade store, or even in something as simple as a farm, I think these principles are universal. And so I did take the time to read your paper on decentralization. All of the people you quoted, I think I agree with the general analysis there. There's no disagreement. And you made a very interesting analysis, and I think we're talking about Papua New Guinea decentralization. One of the things you've captured in your book, which I was able to immediately latch onto, is the fact that Papua New Guinean members of parliament are very powerful. Powerful to the point where We are able to override systems if we so choose. We are able to operate corruptly if we so choose. We can do so many things that we like. It's almost like having mini dictatorships all over the place. And the reason for that is that I think law enforcement is so slow to catch up. There are basically no penalties for doing the wrong thing. There are no rewards for doing the right thing. And even if people are doing the wrong thing and the thing gets reported, it can take 6 or 7 years before the mechanisms of law enforcement finally catch up. So in that sort of environment, it's really easy to get away with many, many things if you so choose. So how an entity functions in Papua New Guinea, whether it's to do with a province, whether it's to do with a local level government, whether it's to do with all of these different arrangements that we have, call them whatever you like. Whether they work or not, that's pretty much on the goodwill and the moral limits to which an individual member of parliament sets for himself. And in such an environment where there's no stick and carrot at all, many, many things can go wrong. And I think we all know that. That's why this has become such a huge subject that people are interested in. Why is this so? And to give you an example with my own province, and for me, I've always been an advocate of good business practice. Doesn't matter where it is, in government or private sector. I always think that good business practice is necessary so that you can be able to achieve the sorts of outcomes that you plan for, you desire, and you can sort of allocate resources and achieve. Without good business practices, you really know. And I think that's the story about it. We don't have good business practices within public sector. And all of the systems are weak. If you've been following PNG politics, you probably heard me debate many times on a lack of oversight of governance mechanisms in the country. And if they do exist, they don't work. And this is where it becomes critical. When nothing is working, you then start to build these personality cults around members of parliament. And if you look at the way, and I think it's become, and you mentioned the client relationship in your paper there, which is actually true. It's almost like a dog-eat-dog relationship now. A member of parliament wants to be re-elected. There are those in his electorate who demand certain things. He then figures out a way to give in to those demands so that he can get re-elected. And so this just keeps going around in circles. You then get, and I think even from the prime ministerial level now, this is what's happening. You look at, and if you go back and look at some of the NSAS debates in parliament, Peter O'Neill particularly, the former prime minister, would stand up in parliament and quite frequently talk about the DSI. And he would say things like, you have no excuse if you don't get re-elected. We've given you enough money. So I'm often, sitting in there, I think to myself, so this 10 million kina, it's a re-election fund. Because that's what the prime minister just said. I heard it, and it's on the handset. And when you look at that, you think to yourself, where does it all end? I mean, how do you fix that? How do you fix that when society accepts it, the ruling elite also accept it, and it's now become normal? So, and I'll come back and talk about my own case. I'm no angel. We all make mistakes. I've been guilty of many. But one thing is, to this pure idea of how do you manage things in such a way that you get the results? And when I first began, I'll give you an example of my province. My province was technically bankrupt in 2017 when I became governor. And that's not to rubbish it, that's just the way it was. And I remember the finance manager at the time, because there was some money in the government's budget, which I decided we should give to the teachers so we could pay for their FX so they could go and have a holiday, because I realized I wasn't going to use all that money anyway, so let's help someone else. I was always very frugal. I didn't want to, like for example, the government's travel budget when I became governor was $1.5 million a year. I decided to make it $500,000. Just to change the trend. Public servants travel and they always collect the 200 kina allowance. When I travel, I decided not to collect the allowance. And I meet a lot of the cost myself. If I go and have lunch with someone for work, I'll pay for it and not go and collect it back. Because I thought that in order to change the culture, I needed to start by doing the things that I think ought to be done. And so it took 3 years before the public servants began to trust me. And I remember one particular case where some money actually went missing. Got misapplied, I shouldn't say missing. Things that were misapplied. And I didn't know about it. When I found out about it, I called the person who's responsible for making sure that these things work properly. And they didn't. So I said to him, why the hell did you do this happen? How could you? He stressed his head and he said, Governor, because everyone is doing it, I thought this money was for you. And I just read in their face, I just couldn't believe he said it. I thought, okay, so I just stumbled on something. This is accepted culture. Doing these sorts of things is normal. So when someone else comes along who doesn't find it normal, well, you're suddenly the normal person in the room. And so this began the journey of trying to change it. I tried to change the budget structure because one of the first things that happened, and this is a good story too. Our provincial treasurer, I sat down with him, I met with everyone, I said, I want the financial reports. Sepik province does not have any financial reports done since 2010. This is 2017. I expect all the financial reports to be completed, all 7 years, by March 2018. The provincial treasurer looks at me and says, why? And I said, well, because I want to see the financial reports. I want to see how we're performing that. He said, well, what are you going to do with it? I said, well, after I read them, I'm going to publish them. I'm going to make it available to the Sepik people. He goes, no, you can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean I can't do that? He said, this information is confidential. I looked at him and I said, what's confidential about the public? I thought about it for like 2 seconds. He said, you still can't have the reports. This is the public servant telling me, a newly elected member of parliament, not even 1 year, that I'm not allowed to see the financial reports and I'm not allowed to publish them. Fortunately, I got the opportunity to replace the guy, which I did. And again, it comes back to members of parliament having a lot of power. You can do whatever you like. Well, I decided to replace this guy and get someone who was going to give me the financial reports because I thought the people of Sepik were entitled to see those reports. We finally went and had all the reports and we gave them to the Auditor General. And he said, you're the first government entity to be up to date ever since I have been working in the Auditor General's office. So I was like, wow, okay. So just trying to do the right thing is a huge struggle because everyone's been doing the wrong thing all this time and the wrong thing has become accepted as the right thing. I tried to change the budget structure because, again, same treasurer. And I looked at all this money that was going into the provincial government, paying hire cars, doing this, that, and the other thing. I said, no, we can't do that stuff. I want us to stop hiring cars. Let's stop sleeping in hotels. Let's save the money so we can use it for something else. And he says to me, Governor, you can't touch this money. You have no say over it. You only have a say over the Provincial Service Improvement Fund programs. This money is ours. We can do with it as we please. So I said, okay, good point. If that money is yours and the PSIP is mine, which money belongs to the people? and he went red in the face for a bit. But it took me 3 years to get everyone to agree that the PSIP is not mine. That these funds, these grants that come to the provincial government don't belong to the public service. All this money belongs to the people. It took me 3 years to change that mindset. And then to start coming back to the issue of decentralization. We had to make the thing work. And I wanted to go to the national government and say, look, if we can make this thing work, support us. Support us so that we can make it work as an example to the others. We don't just make it work because we want to make it work. We make it work so it becomes a tool for us to educate other people. So we've been on this journey. Last year was the first time we managed to get this idea of decentralizing functions and resources to where they're supposed to go. So we started with our local level government councils. I think the last time our local level government councils worked was probably in 1978 or 1980. You guys are the experts, you can do the research and figure it out. But certainly not in my memory did they work. So again, bringing in business best practice and saying, all right, we'll give you the resources, but more than that, we'll come back and check and see if you've been using these resources correctly. So building in a check and balance mechanism at that level. And now I think we're probably the only government entity that is interested in doing something like that at the moment, and we've done it. But just to move you along to the practical outcomes of this, a couple of weeks ago, so this is the second year running, we've been doing this, pushing resources down, forcing everyone to focus. And the other thing is I want to break this client relationship between members of parliament and the general population. When I first became governor, I walked in and there was piles of requests for funds on my table. I won't use the same words I used on that day because I can see you're all refined academics. So let me just leave it at that. But I used some pretty harsh words and took all these documents outside and burned them. I said, I'm not considering any applications for funds. This is public money. It's supposed to go for the public good. Many people hated me for it, and they still hate me today for that. But the flip side of that is that we're able to save money every year that would otherwise have been misused. To the point where the first budget I had was about 234 million in 2018. That was the first budget I ever read to the public. And our last budget, which is this year's, is 491 million. So almost 100% improvement. And I think that's happened because of many things, but most importantly, it was because of the level of governance that I wanted to be brought to bear on these public funds. And then not only that, but to fix the system and say, like for example, I get councillors write to me, I get church people write to me. They write to me from all over places. In a province like mine with 28 local level government councils, what do you do? Obviously, I can't determine which priority is more important than the other. So the way to do it is to empower the business units. We've now empowered 28 local level government councils. And I've said to every single ward member and members of the community, you all go lock yourselves in a room. Here's your money. You've got 100 things you need to fix. You guys figure out which one is more important and start with that. And we'll continue to push this funding downwards and for you to keep fixing whatever you need to fix so that these things work. 3 weeks ago, I visited two places, two very remote places. And I was just telling this story earlier, so Paul's probably tired of it. I ended up going to Ambunti in a helicopter. I went down to the river in a swampy place, beautiful place. I met with the people there, talked about what they needed, and also informed them that the province had provided about 3 million kina for their local level government in order to fix their services. So I told their ward members and I told the people, I said, look, you all go and hold your local level government council accountable. Fix your own stuff. I'll just come and check it, make sure that no one's stolen the money. And so they were very happy with that. Then I went up to Drekikia. And the thing with Drekikia was that it's mountainous. And there aren't many landmarks except mountains. And if they're covered in trees, they all look the same. And if you can't find them on your GPS, you don't know which mountain you're supposed to be flying to. So in this particular case, we're going to a particular village that wasn't on the GPS. So I said to the pilot, look, I know that this particular village is on a mountain. I don't know which one, but I know that it's slightly right of the district station. So maybe just fly in that general direction and we'll find it. If you're ever flying around in an ocean of green with no landmarks, and you know you're lost in a helicopter with no landing pads, you get a bit worried. But in any case, the interesting thing was, the village I was supposed to visit, I got a text message from the local level government president, council president, about a week before. And he said, thank you very much, Governor. The money that you provided to us, we've used it to finally open up this road that's been closed for 40 years. So I remember that the road was open and it was linking about 12 different villages for the first time in 40 years. And I remember that this particular village was one of the 12. So as we were flying over this sea of green, I could see a new road just popping through the mountains. And I said to the pilot, oh, follow that road. So we followed the road. We ended up following the road. And right at the end of the road, we see this big clearing and people waving at the helicopter. So I'm like, oh, we're here. So, you know, we landed, and just to hear the president actually say thank you, that what we planned to do and started doing was actually working, because him and all the board members decided that this particular road needed to be opened up. So they allocated the funds. And they spent the funds in order to achieve that outcome. Now, that was something they couldn't do for 40 years. So I felt a certain sense of joy in to see that just trying to get this whole government system to work using generally accepted internationally best practice in business was actually working right now. And that was one village. There was another village in my own district that I went to 2 days later. And sure enough, the president actually stood up and said, Governor, we managed to fix this road. It now links us all the way up to Margaret district, and it's been closed for 30 years. We're able to do that now. And we're fixing our council chambers. We're fixing our school. We're fixing our aid post. So again, it comes back and, you know, why should we do decentralization? It's for these very specific reasons. You empower the communities and you let them determine their priorities, their spending priorities, and you let them carry it out. If you need to, you intervene in the methodology, you know, how they want to carry it out. You can intervene there, but you let them do it. You empower them. You empower the units, let them work, then you come in and change. And I'm happy to say that after 3 years of fighting, 2 years of trying to implement, there are early results to see that it actually works. And let me say this, these are things that are done in Australia and they're accepted as normal. What we are trying to do in the Sepik, and in fact, 2 years ago when I came on the decentralization tour and I met all of you, and we went and had a look at the way some of the Australian councils were working. Well, I went back home and actually tried to replicate that. And like I said, early results are great so far. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I'm happy to take questions for anything more specific so that we can keep this dynamic. I didn't want to do a presentation because I thought that'll seem too sort of made up. So I'll just speak off the cuff. You can hit me. Not literally.
Right. Thank you very much. That's really interesting and also encouraging presentation. You know, we have got a great turnout. You set a new record for us, actually. We'd have over 100 people in the different 2 different year at UPNG and online. So I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions. I'm just going to, first of all, I hope everyone can hear. I think we've got the sound working well. We do have one question from Wendy, Wendy Tomisu, who's with Treasury. Thank you, Wendy. Perhaps I'll just read it out, and then I invite others to add your questions to the chat, or if you're in this room, put up your hand.
or at UPNG. I think Jolanta's there and can take questions. Professor Pillai was here actually. I didn't realise, so I think he had to. He might not. He might have gone by now. But yeah, so you can ask a question to UPNG, or you can also put up your hand using that function on Zoom. Anyway, the first question from Wendy, and Wendy says there were several changes to the Decentralisation Act up to the DDA Act of 2014 that repealed the JDPBC, which is the Joint District Planning and Budget Committees, to strengthen service delivery. However, poor governance and corruption continues to erode despite the increase in funding. How should governance be improved? I mean, I guess you've given us some examples of that, but yeah, I guess I'll let you respond further to that question.
Again, the struggle I have with that is that governance is pretty much something that the individual, because there's no law, well, the laws are there, but there's no mechanism to compel anyone to improve governance. So governance actually becomes a choice. Good governance becomes a choice. And you're right. I worry about the DDA because they're given so much financial powers and no oversight. Because if you look at the need for audits only stop at provincial health authorities and at the provincial government. There's no audit requirement at the local level, below the province. So that's the thing. I mean, how do you do it? I would prefer that the province takes over those governance roles at the lower level. However, districts do not want to be subject to governance by the province. It's pretty much like, for example, members of parliament take issue when presidents who are members of the DDA question them on certain issues. Members of parliament expect that DDA, well, all the members will just say yes. They basically bring a shopping list, everybody says yes, go for it. So a lot of presidents will actually tend to walk out of these meetings and not provide quorum. And so in order to solve that problem, certain ministers in O'Neill's cabinet decided that they were going to change the election system for presidents. So rather than having the presidents directly elected by the people, they changed it so that presidents could be directly, would be elected by the councillors. So it became a proxy vote. I had an issue with it. I objected. In fact, we went to court to try to stop this because I felt that that arrangement would erode good governance, because the presidents now become, they're no longer directly elected. Their power comes from the ward members. The ward members can be easily manipulated, which in many cases we found actually happened. The open members ended up paying money to lobby to make sure certain individuals became presidents. And that happened all over the country. So, and all of that was simply done to stack DDA board. Now, I argued with some of these members of parliament and I said, look, I need these members in the provincial assembly. And I don't want puppets in the provincial assembly. I want to have people who are actually going to debate and do the right thing in the assembly. By changing the way you elect these presidents, you're also changing the way members of the provincial assembly are constituted. And that doesn't work for us because we're a constituent assembly. We're not the same as your board. Why can't you just change the DDA, which is easy? You just have a vote on the voices and you can change the act and remove all the presidents from your DDA. You don't need them. You might as well appoint all your own members because that's what you're trying to do anyway. So you appoint your own members and you can continue doing whatever you want at the DDA level. There's no need to change the electoral process to get the outcome you want. Why are you doing that? But they still disagreed, they changed it. Nobody listened because Peter O'Neill was in charge and Peter O'Neill was basically using the DDA as a carrot to divide and rule. That's what he was doing. And he made it very clear on the floor, you're giving 10 million a year. If you can't use that to get re-elected, then that's your problem. It's nothing to do with me. So yeah, we need to, I think that DDA, the problem is open members of parliament like having the DDA because there's no governance, there's very little scrutiny, and you can get away with a lot, even using that. And like I said, if you do anything silly, And we've heard many instances where silly things have happened. It'll take 10 years before law enforcement catches up with them anyway. So I guess if you're, willing to be a bit of a roughneck, you say, well, if I'm making nothing now, worry about the law later. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of, unfortunately.
Okay, I think we might have some questions at PNG. Is that right? We go over to you before we go back to the chat.
Yes, we have two questions here. Two people would like to ask a question.
Great, please go ahead. Perhaps just introduce yourself.
From political science strand, first year honor student. My question is regarding the mention that Honorable Allan said. He made a mention of breaking the practice of patron-client relationship in PNG. That scares me a bit because for PNG, Papua New Guinea is located in the region of Southeast Asian Pacific, where the practice of patron-client relationship was very traditional and it's been strong. Another like the practice of we will say that the practice of patron-client relationship is not the whom we know system. So the focus of the presentation was on the making decentralization work in PNG, which I was expecting you to make a mention on the different dimension of the decentralization process, which you haven't make a mention of it. The focus is, from what you have presented, I saw that you are focusing on the fiscal aspect of it, the dimension of it, which is the economic aspect. So I want to ask, what are some incentives that you come up with in ceasing this practice of patron-client relationship in PNG? Because you haven't make a mention. I was expecting you to make a mention of something like how we can assign revenues, about the revenue assignment at the local level government council, so it can engage people via their local level council to participate in some money generating activities or like this, so it can at least minimize minimize the movement of people from moving from rural areas to urban areas in a manner of chain rural urban migration that leads to the enclavement of people in urban areas. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
All right, thank you very much. I think we've got the.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's go on that question, then we'll take another question. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, I think you're mixing two different things. One of the important things is that, like, I'm not a big believer that government should be in business. I don't think local level governments or even provinces should be involved in money-making activities. Our primary role is a tax collector. We should be levying taxes and things like that. We collect the taxes, and then we transparently use those taxes to deliver public goods and services. I think that's the role of government. I think in Papua New Guinea, we've gotten everything confused to the point where we think government should be in business so that it makes extra money and then it uses that extra money to provide services. But if you study the whole gamut of PNG in the last 40 odd years we've been independent, not one single government business has actually functioned to the point where it's making enough money to contribute to the national coffers. So I think that's a fallacy, and it comes from bad data. The data does not support the idea that government agencies can run a business. I mean, you've got Digital Telecom, PNG Power. I mean, not Digital, sorry, Telecom, PNG Power, PNG Water, you name it, New Guinea. I won't sort of finish the list. So I'd rather focus on taxes, which is something I did in 2017 when I came in. We improved taxes. We were collecting 5 million in 2017. I think we're collecting 22 million now. So that's a 400% increase in taxes in the last, in my term. So I would keep the idea of running a business and running a government totally separate, because they're two different things. In a business, you want to make a profit. In a government, you want to make sure that you're delivering services. And public goods and services, not private ones. So this is where I think government also has a responsibility to create the environment so that businesses can thrive, because businesses will create opportunities. You then tax those opportunities, and then again, you continue to build your public finances. Okay. Wanting to improve village life, let me give you, and again, you asked two different questions in my view. So I've answered the first one, I'll answer the second. Coming back to the idea of, how do you make it so that people leave the towns and go back to their villages? This is the reason why we started the Smart Cocoa program in 2018. As a result of the work we've done, for example, I've been to very remote villages. For example, I went to Binam. Binam is about 120 minutes by helicopter from Uiwek. It's up in the mountains bordering with Enga. It's on the Karawari River. These people basically couldn't afford consumer goods. We established, and because it's so far away, I'm giving that example. There are so many other communities. We've established more than 500 village nurseries. This is one of the 500. And I'm using Binam because it's probably one of the furthest from Uiwek. It takes, if you're in Binam and you want to go to Engoram, you float down the river. It takes you 8 hours on the river. You get to Engoram. It takes you 2 hours by PNG from there to Uiwek. So just to give you some idea of distances. We managed to establish a cocoa nursery there in 2018. We trained the people. They established their own plantations. When I visited them about 8 weeks ago, they were already making enough money to pay for their own roofing iron. They bought the clothes, they bought solar lights, solar panels. They've basically become a self-sustaining community. About 4 weeks ago, I visited another one. This other village is called Shangriwa. Shangriwa is just on the border of Engoram district, Engoram LLG, and Yuat LLG. It's a very big village. It has a population of about 2,000 people. And they said something really interesting. Again, we established one of our nurseries and training centers there. There are people in that village now who build big cocoa plantations, and they're able to make 10, 15,000 kina on one trip going down to Engoram. They're closer to Engoram. It takes them maybe 4 hours to get to Engoram. The interesting thing that I learned in Changriwa was that they had big settlements in Uiwek town. When the village people started making money from cocoa, the people in the settlements in town left the settlements, came back to the village, took advantage of the opportunity, started farming their own land. They were also making money in the village. But with all the cocoa work we did, let me go a little bit further. Since you're asking economy, let's talk economy. Engoram never had a supermarket. I think it had a supermarket in 1972. But when the white people were living there were a lot of Australians living in Engoram. I think today we only have one white person and his family living there. He's a crazy guy by the name of Jesse Pryor, and he's running we call him the white crocodile. Don't worry about that. You can find him online. He does nice jobs. Anyway, but there's no more white people in Engoram. 2 years ago, a supermarket, just like any in Port Moresby, was established in Engoram. There's a simple reason for that. The people of Engoram are now making so much money from cocoa. They're able to support a supermarket establishment in their district for the first time in almost ever. So I hope that answers your two different questions. You need different approaches. Decentralization of government is one issue. And I'm talking about decentralization at the local level. There are issues to do with legislation and so on and so forth between national government and provincial government. I'm not interested so much in legislation. I'm interested in the practical things you can do. I'm interested in autonomy, but not an autonomy that's written on paper. I'm interested in the practical autonomy. For example, before I became governor, Sepik never had an export vessel leave our port. In order to export cargo from Sepik anywhere in the world, you had to ship it to Madang, and it would be transshipped from Madang. So we went with the work we've done in cocoa. We built volumes to such an extent that we now have a minimum of 4 vessels departing Sepik every month. We went from 0 to 4. Sometimes we get 5 vessels a month. That's the strength of the economy that we've built since 2018. And I think I don't have any economic data because there is none. But I can tell you we went from 0 ships to 4 export vessels a month. And that's happening right now. It's happened to the point where now the Australian government has to help us by rebuilding the port. We're just having so much traffic. And in fact, next week, the Prime Minister will be launching a new international wharf that has to cater for all of this production that we have slated to come on stream within the next 5 to 7 years. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Or answers. We've got a lot more questions. I want to go back to you, PNG, first. I think you had a second question, Jolanda. Do you have someone else who wants to ask a question?
Good afternoon.
And maybe just ask, if you could just stand up so we can all see you when you're asking the question.
Good afternoon. This is in regards to the decentralization in the financial sector, especially in local businesses. So before I start, I'm just going to give an example here. Last week we had the Oscars in the US, and we saw the bilum, a Goroka bilum that was being carried by someone. And if you go to the online shop that's selling the bilum costs about $500 Australian dollars. That's 10 times the value, and that is being sold in our local craft market. So they buy local billions at $50 or $40, and then they sell it at 10 times the value. So my question is, and last year, I think the government has passed the Electronic Transactions Act that is to do with local trade and online payments. So my question is, like, for local craftspeople and, people like in the Sepik or in the highlands where they make bilums, or we have people who design tapa cloths, and they want to get their crafts online, and they have to go through, we don't have like PayPal and other online payments in the country. So, I mean, this has to do with this decentralization also. It is, I think it's in the field of decentralization of financial services. So are there any things done to fast track this area so that people don't have to go through middlemen to sell their goods, so that they can be earning like 10 or even like 10 times the value that they're selling at the local craft market? Thank you.
I think there are many other issues related to that. For example, foreign exchange control and those kinds of things, which I think the central bank would be interested in. So I think we're still some way away from that. As you know, there's been strict controls on foreign exchange out of Papua New Guinea. I mean, I tried getting cash out of an ATM, an Australian ATM yesterday, and they wouldn't let me using my BSP card. So I had to ring the bank and say, look, what's wrong with my card? They said, no, look, there's nothing wrong with your card, but you can only get $100. And I'm like, oh my God. So I think it's a little bit more than the way you oversimplify it. But let me just say this. If there is a demand for a product anywhere in the world, I mean, look, people are shipping illegal drugs because there's a demand for it, and they're making a lot of money from it. And I'm using that as a very extreme example. So whether it be bilums or vanilla or cocoa or gold or whatever the commodity is, as long as there's a demand somewhere for that particular product, then you will find smart entrepreneurs in between who will figure out a way somewhere along, how they inject themselves in the value chain so that they can get that product to market. And the fact that someone is willing to pay $500 for this bilum is probably an indication, and it's probably, it's more upmarket. I don't think there are too many people in the world who want to pay $500 for a bilum. It's just like no one wants to pay $10,000 for a Louis Vuitton handbag. I certainly won't.
Some do.
Yeah, some do. So, there's different products for different people. Marketing is a complex subject on its own. I won't be able to explain all that to you. But one thing I do know is that, for example, in my province, there's a tree called Cryptocarya masoya. And they take the masoya oil out of the bark of the tree, and that's used in perfumery. when a couple of years ago, when people discovered that cryptocurrency soya grew in Sepik, well, we had Asians come across the border into WeWork to buy cryptocurrency soya. And again, that comes back to the point I originally made. If there's a demand for something, someone will figure out a way to get it. And you might not be happy with the price you get, but at the end of the day, if you're going to get into business, you need to understand that full business, the entire value chain, and figure out how you can get involved so that you can make money from it. It's not as simple as just opening up to PayPal and all these other things. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thanks, Colin. Look, we're starting to run out of time. We've got a lot of questions online, so perhaps just hold off, Colin, for a little bit. There are a couple, I might start taking questions together. So there's one question there, Sandra has asked, what's the level of interest from other provincial governors and MPs in your reforms, in what you're doing? And I guess there's a sort of somewhat similar question from Barbara Thomas. What's going to happen to what you've built when you are no longer governor? Will it stand the test of time or the test of less principled leaders?
Very good questions. Look, we're all built differently. We all want to do different things. I guess for me, I've got a good reputation in business and in the community, and I want to maintain that. And I want to build something that works. And I'm hoping that we'll create enough of a demand amongst young Sepiks and young Papua New Guineans in general, so that if they see the way the thing is working and if they like it, they will then create the demand to keep it. I think that's the best way I can answer it. In terms of whether my colleagues like it or not, I won't answer that question.
Too dangerous. Okay, well, we'll go to Colin.
Well, firstly, thanks for your presentation, Governor. I found it really insightful, especially all those practical examples that you gave of delivering services on the ground. So the gist of what I got was that you're essentially focused on empowering LLGs, local level government. Just wanted to get your reflections on, in 1995, the gist of the organic law of the 95 reforms was to empower local level governments. And I think we can all agree that they never got the funding and the resources necessary to deliver on those functions. So if you're about empowering LLGs, and you can do that through national grants, you could do that through provincial internal revenue, why don't MPs, national parliamentarians, essentially just get out of the way of development funds, for their districts and their province, and use the systems that are in place to empower the LLGs? Because isn't that what real decentralisation is about? Ward councillors elected by their people, so are LLG presidents. If they're not delivering, the people can decide whether or not they want to keep them in power.
Well, it's an interesting point you make, and see, therein lies the problem. See, I'm interested in the system. I don't think there are too many politicians who are interested in the system. I do that simply because I'm a systems person. I work well in systems. I deliberately try not to go and hand out checks, but all my colleagues do. So there's been a demand created a certain way. I resist the urge to go and hand out checks, and I get criticized for it. People are like, oh, how come the governor didn't fix this road? And they'll be like, how come the governor didn't fix this school? How come the governor didn't stop this robbery on the highway? How come the governor didn't, we've gotten to a point where and I like the way, the paper that the professor and the team wrote. Members of parliament in Papua New Guinea have become so powerful that the workings of the entire country hang on the whims of 111 men. That's it. Everybody else is, I guess, a spectator. And so if a member of parliament builds a road, there's a huge celebration. He built a road. It's the greatest thing since God walked the earth. He built a road. In Australia, if you guys build a train line from here to Queensland, that's nothing. It's not even important. It just happens. Not in Papua New Guinea. If a member of parliament builds a classroom, there's a celebration. Pigs die, so we can have a celebration over a classroom. That's the level we are at. It's just so hand to mouth. I call it hand to mouth. You got to feed them. And so the standard of a politician in Papua New Guinea is someone who can build roads, bridges, and classrooms. Full stop. no good governance, no anything. The sorts of things that myself and maybe one or two other MPs are doing is ridiculous, even crazy. You know, you should be committed to an asylum. You should be building roads, bridges, and classrooms. We don't talk about job creation, and nobody's interested in that. So for me to sort of go and have a simple COCO program that empowers people so they make their own money in the village, you're crazy. Don't do that sort of thing. Go build roads, bridges, and classrooms. That's the demand. That's the level of demand from the community, unfortunately. So how do you get them to go beyond that? When I started doing budgets, and this is the comment from the provincial administrator of ECB, he actually looked at me in tears. And this is a guy who's 60 years old. He's been in public service most of his adult life. And he said to me, "You're the first member of parliament I have met that is actually allowing us to allocate funds to priorities." That's what he said to me. I guess, I don't know how you solve it. I really don't. I couldn't. It's going to depend on the people of Papua New Guinea getting away from being fed, you know, lollies to actually vote for members of parliament who are going to do the right thing. And I don't know how you do that. I'm hated in many parts of Papua New Guinea because I don't build roads, bridges, and classrooms. I have a team of people delivering things because I think that's what they're supposed to do. I'm empowering a team. I'm building a team. And that's not the Papua New Guinean way. The Papua New Guinean way is that one man builds everything. This member of parliament, the member of parliament will stand up and say, "I built you people a road, so you have to go to it. I built your classroom, remember? I gave money to your church." That's not what I'm doing. I would probably work better as an Australian politician than a PNG.
Okay, I know there are lots more questions. Just got one more on the chat from James, who says that special autonomy is a hot topic in many circles as a form of greater decentralisation to empower provinces, or I guess some provinces. And I know you talked about practical autonomy, I think, right? But what are your thoughts on autonomy?
Well, when COVID-19 first came out, I was the first, I think, politician worldwide to ban travel of people into my province because of COVID. There's no law that says I couldn't do that, but I did that. I was criticized. I think even I was quoted in some international newspapers saying that there was this racist Papua New Guinean politician that was banning Chinese from going into his province. 6 months later, it was standard practice across the whole world to lock down their countries. But I was the first one to do it, by the way, probably in the world. Autonomy. ECB becomes autonomous the minute we make enough money to sustain our own economy. We're autonomous. Nobody can tell us what to do. Even today, I think without it having, and you know, you mentioned the 1995 reforms, and sorry, I didn't answer that properly. I think that only about 12% of the 1995 reforms have been implemented. I think the 1995 reforms are brilliant. I just don't think we fully implemented them. And a lot of the things I'm doing in my province is to try to implement the 1995 organic law reforms and to sort of make them work. I think that while the law actually gives us, if you look at the 1995 organic law reforms, it gives provinces a hell of a lot of power. There's a lot of autonomy already there in the law, but no one's actually operationalized it. And how do you operationalize it? Do you need permission from someone to do it? No, you don't. There's already provision there for you to actually go out and do it. The problem arises when, how do you fund it? I think that's where and this is where the national government has been, and particularly the O'Neill government, in their 8 years in office, they were really conniving in the way they starved provinces of funding. They actually took the funding away from the provinces and channeled them into the DDAs. They did that deliberately, and I think you all know this. So it comes down to how the funding is being channeled. So I felt that the way to resolve the problem is to channel those funds that come to the province transparently using the 1995 processes that are allowed for in law. For example, the LLGs were given they're supposed to pass an FEC resolution that determines what their priorities are and where they're supposed to spend money on. None of the LLGs have worked since 1995 because the funding never went down. The funding just stopped either at national level or at provincial level. So I see funding kind of the same way that you would think of petrol in your car. It's fuel for the car. How far the car goes depends on how much fuel you give it. So what I decided to do was say, look, let's just get that funding down there, get those cars moving. Once they're moving, then we can figure out the problems as we go along. What do we need to do? Change a tire, new fan belt, what? But let's get the car moving. So, to sort of answer your question in a roundabout way, I think that we don't need too many laws. We just got to make the practical parts of it work, and that's what I'm interested in. The philosophy is already written. We just need to make it work.
Okay, we are running out of time. I think we're going to take one more question here from Thomas, and then we'll have to wrap up, I'm afraid.
My name is Thomas, and I want to ask two quick ones. First one is on the DDA. In the old government, has, I think, made a right decision to establish that and fund it correctly, adequately. But over the years, you can see that the districts or MPs, they receive almost the same amount of money, which is about 10 billion. But in some districts, there is evidence of development. But in some districts, there's nothing, and yet those districts, they're still complaining for more funding. So I don't know the reason for that. Okay, secondly, is about the LLGs. So LLGs, they also form as part of the decentralization. So whose responsibility is actually to fund the LLGs? Because right now, most of the LLGs, they don't really get enough adequate funding. So whether it's the national government or the provincial government or the open MP's responsibility to fund it. Thank you.
Let me answer it like this. If I had my way, I would move towards the block granting system that Australia currently uses between the states and the federal government. Because, and if you look at it now, Bougainville already has they've moved to a block granting system. See, the block granting system forces you to spend money wisely. The current system, current financial system we have, all the priorities are determined in treasury. In fact, they're determined beforehand without paying attention to like the size of the electorate. I mean, a lot of people praise Wabeg district. Wabeg district is 1,000 square kilometers. My district of Engoram is 17,000 square kilometers. So if you were going to allocate money, the same money that Wabeg gets, I think Engoram should get 170 million kina a year. Enga province is 12,000 square kilometers. My district of Engoram is still 17,000 square kilometers. It's almost twice the size of Enga province. My second largest district is Ambudi Drilikia. It's 13,000 square kilometers. It's still bigger than Enga province. It's bigger than Jiwaka, it's bigger than Western Highlands, Southern Highlands, and it's bigger than Hela as well. So how, I have an issue with the funding mechanisms. Let me put it that way. So when you look on the face of it, you say, okay, this member is getting 10 million, this member is getting 10 million. But what size area are they working on? My province is 44,000 square kilometers. It receives 300 million kina a year from the national government. Bougainville is 9,000 square kilometers. It receives 600 million kina a year from the national government. Enga is 12,000 square kilometers. It gets 600 million kina a year, twice what my province gets. Hela gets 600 million, and my province is 4 times the size of Hela. So I think you need to compare apples with apples, and at the moment they're not. So if you do a bit more analysis and you take a look at these things, then you'll understand the struggles that my province has. My province is the second largest in the country. Only Western province is bigger than mine. But in terms of the funding we get, so you've got to look at the whole picture. And so it's not just as simple as, oh, this member is getting 10 million, that one is getting 10 million. My smallest district is Mapri. It's 1,000 square kilometers. It's the same size as Wabeg district. And if you come to Sepik, you'll see that our most developed district is actually Mapri. And even Sepiks will stand up and say, why is Mapri looking really good? And what's wrong with my district? Well, you forget that your district is 13 times the size of Mapri. So it's a lot more difficult to do things with bigger districts, bigger provinces. So if you follow some of the debates we've had in Parliament, I've always argued around developing strategic assets. See, I would rather we all agree and develop more of it, or we all agreed and develop East New Britain, because we say we can create 100,000 jobs here. Let's go and spend $1 billion kina in one place. Let's develop everything, build the housing estates and everything so people can come and live there, whether they're from ECB or they're from Bedeng or they're from Jiwaka, it doesn't matter. They're all going to come and live in Leh because we're going to take a deliberate decision to spend 2 billion kina here developing this place. I think we need to get away from district-based spending and go towards more strategic spending, which is at this point in time we won't, because the focus is on the districts and the focus is on, like your book, your paper so correctly puts it, the focus is on giving money to the open members, making the DDAs work, because that helps in getting them re-election, or so people think. But I think Michael wrote a really good paper that actually blows that out of the water. It doesn't matter how much money you spend. It doesn't matter how much money goes to the DDA and the member is spending it. At the end of the day, the elections will sort of go wherever they want to go. Thank you very much.
All right, we will to draw proceedings to a close. I know we haven't been able to take all the questions, whether in myself, whether in this room or online. I'm sure there are more questions in PNG as well. So sorry if you've asked a question, but thanks everyone for turning up. I think it's just the number of people we've had, the number of questions. It shows the appetite for this sort of thing. I think reflecting on it, it's just, you know, academics love to talk and talk amongst ourselves, but we also actually like to interact and hear from politicians and get some of that ground reality. So I really appreciate the Governor fitting us into your busy schedule on this trip, and please do come again, stay in touch, write us a blog and take part in that broader discussion, as I know you do. I thought also just that, you know, that you had some positive stories to tell, a positive message. I think that's really good to hear. You know, you were kind enough to mention our paper, and I'll just mention that's part of this new book, Papua New Guinea Government, Economy and Society, that we've just brought out with PNG. In fact, I've got a copy that I'm going to present to you after this seminar. And yeah, please, it's free online. But yeah, one of the chapters is on decentralisation, which I wrote actually with Lawang, who's here, and Dr. Sause. I'm not sure if you're there right now at PNG. Yeah, we sort of set out a history, especially focusing on political decentralisation, and we refrain from giving the solution, because I think very people love to, perhaps too readily, sort of give the solution, and obviously lots of solutions have been tried. But yeah, I've got to say I'm personally very sympathetic with your approach, which seems to be maybe, yeah, the solution is not so much further tinkering with the legislation and the structure, but actually taking what you've got and making it work, which I think is your approach. So that was really interesting to hear as well. So that's it for the April edition of the ANU UPNG seminar. I think normally we're at the end of the month, but because Governor was here and also because of the graduation at the end of the month, we moved it forward. So we're going to take a break now until the end of May. But we've got a couple more really good seminars lined up for May and June. So please keep an eye out, you know, for the newsletter and the announcements of these seminars. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, either online at UPNG here at ANU. And could you please all join me again in thanking Governor Allan for great talk. Good. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I think we'll give you